Larry David had a viral moment born from a viral moment that was not meant to be a viral moment. Elmo, the red monster from Sesame Street, just wanted to check in on his friends, like all of America, and Elmo posted an X, formerly known as Twitter, and a tweet, formerly known as an X or whatever, to his profile, the Sesame Street created Elmo profile, because yes, we know he's a Muppet, he's a puppet, and it asked pretty much a simple question. Elmo reached out to the world and said, just checking in, how's everyone doing? Pretty simple. Just checking in, America. People on the Twitter, on the X, if you will. How is everybody doing? And so while this is probably meant to bring up some responses like, hey, I'm doing great, Elmo, or loving life, Elmo, or totally sweet, Elmo, what were the actual responses that were there? Well, there were a lot of them, as you can see from the picture if you're watching the video. There were 200 or 20K words of responses and was shared 60,000 times. The whole thing was viewed 210 times, 210 million times, I should say. And what were some actual responses that were given? One, like from Rainn Wilson, saying that, I'm kind of in a crossroads and frankly could use a little support. My good friend Natasha Carter said, it's the 75th of January. What do you think? And this response coming from Bridget Gabriel, which says, America is struggling, Elmo. We need Trump back. So that was all said. Now, with all that response, I'm not sure exactly how much response and how much actually help that Rainn Wilson needed being at his crossroads, and just how many days people counted on this day, because the whole this is the 18th of February has been kind of overdone. But with over 20,000 responses when I snipped it for the script, there's a pretty much a success nature of what's going on here. Many people had issues. Where people just had serious issues and were not doing so well, and we're responding to that there. There were many that were sarcastic, such as my friend Natasha's, but still saying, hey, we're not doing as great as we could be. And there were many that were sort of agenda driven, such as the IRS and folks like that, just popping in there because many people were watching that tweet. And of course, from Bridget Gabriel, who of course saying that we need Trump. That's a whole nother issue, a whole nother podcast. And I don't think Elmo wants to solve that problem. But that one spark came to be a segment for an idea for national morning television that should have been a fun spot and a clever way to promote mental health resources for America. So Elmo and his father, Louis, because Elmo is a toddler, went on to Today's Show and went to talk about mental health. Elmo was doing just that, discussing mental health from the prospect of a toddler to adults. Remember, Elmo is a character who is supposed to be 3.5 years old, so he has that sort of mentality. That's why he has the whiny, squeaky voice. That's why he has that sort of just nature of energy. That's why he's always all over the place. Meanwhile, waiting in the wings, Larry David is there. He's there to promote the final season of Curb Your Enthusiasm, and he's just sort of out there. Not sure if he's actually in the green room and he's watching it, or if he's just kind of standing around waiting for a segment. But as that segment begins to wrap, he physically assaults Elmo, the puppet, like, well, like this. If you're watching video, you see the picture of Larry David walking onto the screen as Hoda Kotb just gasped in disgust. And looks like his father is wanting to do something, but remember, he's a puppet and being controlled from the top down, so he can't really do very much. However, his father did take a time, Lewis did take some time to use that as an opportunity to teach us a lesson, very quick lesson in emotional well being, because maybe Larry David isn't, and permission before touching someone, which he didn't get, obviously. So let's fast forward about 15 hours later. It is now late night with Seth Meyers. And Larry David is on the couch. He's sitting there talking to Seth. And Seth asks the question, dude, what's going on? Explain yourself. What was that all about? Here's a quote from Larry David. Yeah, I did it. Elmo was talking. I was waiting to be interviewed, and Elmo was going on about mental health, and I had to listen to every word. And I was going, oh my God, I can't take this. I can't take another second of this. And I got off the chair and approached him, and I throttled him. I couldn't take it. And you know what? I'd do it again. Full disclosure, Larry David actually apologized at the end of the segment he did on Today's Show, and Elmo the puppet did accept. So there's no love lost there, but the change in scenery, the change in tone, because when we originally posted this story, it was the fact that Larry David had to apologize for assaulting Elmo, and then, of course, it turned into, and I do it again if I had a chance to. Let me pause for a moment and address a point you may have picked up in this whole thing in this episode, and you'll definitely pick up as I continue to do this. So, the person we're talking about is Larry David, and I'm not calling him Larry or David, it's Larry David. And I've been doing that every single iteration, and I'll continue to do that for most iterations of this show. And why is that? Well, it's sort of the nature of it. My name is John Payne, and when your name is John Payne, first name John, last name Payne, and you spend 50 years being called John Payne, you kind of get that. Larry David is kind of known in talk as Larry David, so many people just sort of refer to him as two names. So go with that with me, please. Don't let that distract you. There's plenty of other things to distract you. Don't let Larry David being called Larry David be the distraction. So it also helps in the presentation because Larry David, the character, is living a life on camera that is a mash of comedy genius of the real life Larry David and the moments that tend to be made up in his comedy head and sometimes do happen, although we'll get to that in a moment. He's a co-creator of Seinfeld and the star of the fictionally autobiographical, that's a big word, Curb Your Enthusiasm, and he lives a relatively normal life, actually. Mr. David just is sort of a guy. As documented by fans and by people who know him for years, he's just a normal kind of guy who he is and just happens to be that way. He's not the total curmudgeon or the person you see on television. That is just what goes on. He does that to bring in the eyeballs, bring in the money, get people to pay him more paychecks to be funny. It's the funny end of his comedy genius. It's also sort of the second wit he has in itself, but playing it out for reals, doesn't pay just do it in the supermarket, but paying it out on camera is what happens. He has all the things that everyone's done in the path to comedy to where he is. He did all the rounds of regular jobs while he was working his way through early days in stand-up and for comedy writing. He also had a famous one-year stint on Saturday Night Live. Famous now that he's extra famous, but famous for these three things in particular. First, he only got one sketch on the air in the full season. One sketch late in the year, and it was like the very last sketch of the night, literally at right past the best sketch. That's the best thing he could do in his writing career for Saturday Night Live. He met Julia Louis-Dreyfus, number 2, so that was good for her to bring her in for Seinfeld. And this is the kind of thing that really kind of kicked off his humor and the way he works, the way he lives, if you will. He quit the show at the end of the one season because he wasn't doing so well. 2 days later, he comes back in, sits at his desk, and goes to work on something. Now, he still was not really working on the show, but he just came into work like nothing happened, even though he literally put in his resignation 2 days before. So Larry David, the man, is really nothing like Larry David, the character who portrays in Curb Your Enthusiasm and on commercials. He does have a reputation for being standoffish, which kind of plays off in the actual TV world and real world, but that happens for people when they kind of get things confused. You have weird sort of interactions with people in public and they don't really get what's going on. When celebrities are met by people who are fans and fans get to be a little too fansy in the process, you get to be that way. But for fans that get to meet him in meet and greets or actually have a chance to talk to him in actual human centers, they find he's just a regular guy. A little standoffish. He does talk about his money, but he doesn't do all the crazy things that you usually see him do, although some of them do come out. Now, this is the reason, because of that, so many fans who fall in love with a character can't really fathom the difference between the character and a person, and that character not being the true person. It's a real reason why many actors and actresses in the heydays of daytime soap operas had so many encounters and so many stories about such thing. Every time one would go on to a talk show, you'd hear them talk about some fan who would hit him with a purse because they did something wrong to that other person, or someone who would say, "Are you the evil twin? Or are you the good twin?" Because I can tell you because it's the same person, same actor. This, as you know, Joseph Mascalo was not actually Stefano DiMera, although he played him pretty evilly and well all this time. And Eric Braeden is actually not Victor Newman. You may see him someplace and say, "Hey, Victor Newman." That's not who he is. He has an actual name, an actual background. But you can try telling that to some longtime Days of Our Lives fans or Young and the Restless fans and gauge the results you get from that. They may not believe you. They may kind of wink and nod. Maybe sort of the wrestling is fake sort of thought process where like, yeah, we know, but we really pretend like it doesn't work out. And while I knew this was not going to be a hit job going on Larry David when we picked this topic, he's a person that, honestly, I've never actually seen a full episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm. And I only know him from the commercials, like the Crypto.com commercial that was what it was last year. And just various things here or there, and of course, hearing quips from people he's known in famous situations that to ask about him that have Larry David moments, moments that are much like the TV fictional version of Larry David because he's kind of that inside, but it's really sort of played off for laughs. I wasn't completely sure how this thing was going to go, how it was going to end, where it was going to go, and the biggest thing is why would this guy go on TV and just choke out Elmo like that? What was the point? What did he think he was getting out of that? Actually, I do get that. And I get that because this is the story of the week. This is the podcast for the story of the week. And this is what we're talking about. We take the story of the week from the top 10 stories of the week in the weekly wrap up podcast, and we put it together in a longer form extension of that because it seems like something you want to talk about. Apparently, Larry David fighting Elmo on live TV and then saying he'd do it again is something you all want to talk about. It's actually one of the top stories of the week, not including the headline that read about the overdose of the porn star. And if you want to know full stories of that one, go back and watch or listen to the weekly wrap up to get the links for that story because that's a very short deal, but it's not what we're here for today. We're obviously talking about Larry David. So make sure you know that Larry David is a character, and Larry David is also a character. So there you go. There's the character Larry David, and there's the person who is who he is. It all seems to make sense for fans of his show on premium cable, if you still call it premium cable, or essentially the streaming services, because basically everybody's watching on Max. In fact, the final 10 episode season of Curb Your Enthusiasm began on Sunday, the 4th, as we're recording this on the 10th of February. And the series finale will end up on April the 7th. All 10 episodes in succession. You can watch them all there on your streaming service, Max or HBO itself. And we're just going to wrap this up by saying good luck to you, Larry David, on whatever you decide to do next, because we know it will be funny and people will tune in for it. My name is Jay Cleveland Payne. This has been the Story of the Week podcast, and we do this as an extension of the weekly wrap-up. The weekly wrap-up gives y'all a chance to see what top 10 stories were engaged in by you in our feeds on Facebook and Twitter. So go to facebook.com/This Is the Conversation Project or Twitter or x.com/th_conversation and engage in news stories we post every single 50 minutes. We got them on both of them all day, all night, all the time. The higher engagement score we have, the better chance we have of talking about a story. We have a weekday program called Things You Might Have Heard, which are the top stories of the previous day. We have the weekly wrap up, which are the top stories of the previous week. And we do an expansion here for the story of the week. Hopefully you're enjoying how we're doing some expansions. If you're not seeing the things in the video, and I'm over talking video then for the audio folks, because this began as a pure audio version, check out the video links at our website, thisisaconversationproject.com. You can also email us at the conversation inbox at gmail.com and let us know how we can do things better or not as worse, as we say. I always end these things by saying stay hydrated, stay limber, stay on task, because it really is about all the grand things you are here for. We appreciate you watching the video, listening to the audio, and checking the links that we have on our feeds. And we know people out there appreciate you for even greater things that you're there for. We need the clicks, we need the likes, we need the people looking at stuff, but people out there really need you. So do what you can to make sure you are staying healthy and strong so you can be there for those who are in need. Thank you so much for being there for me in need for this thing. I love you. I mean a lot. We'll see what story next week we'll talk about. We'll extend to for your story of the week.